book, The Bonobo Way, came out back in 2014. We would love if anybody wanted to call in. If you have any questions as we're kind of going through this, we're going to be here at 512-686-0279. That number again is 512-686-0279. And with that, thanks again for being with us. Tell us just a little bit about this book and kind of where that project got started for you.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'm happy to be here. Just a shout out to Dr. Darrell Ray, who I met actually before I wrote the book.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm so excited to, be in his continuing show. And the Bonobo Way is a book that I wrote based on the bonobos. And the bonobos are the make love, not war chimpanzees who swing through the trees as well as with each other.
Mm.
And they are an inspiration to me. I don't use them as a blueprint, but I do use them as an inspiration. Bonobos are important for several reasons. One, they're very close to us. They're over 98% genetically similar to us. And, scientists are now saying that they're closer than common chimps, which is pretty damn close. And even if you don't believe in science, you just look into their eyes and you can see that missing link, Number two, they have a lot of sex. We'll talk about that more later since this is a show called Secular Sexuality.
No question.
Quickly, number three, they empower the females. They're very, very beyond Me Too. And number four, the males are good with it. Male well-being, important part of female empowerment. You can't really have one without the other if you're going to have, males and females and everybody in between and on the outside and the inside. And then number five, and this is probably kind of the most significant thing about bonobos and why they are so important to us. I mean, all the species are important and they all are worth saving. But bonobos use all of the above to make peace through pleasure. That is, bonobos have never been seen killing each other in the wild or captivity, and they seem to use all this sex, all this female empowerment, all this male well-being, and maybe, because they are a little close to us, their intelligence, to, like I said, create peace through pleasure. So in a coconut shell, that's
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, it makes sense why, anthropologists and evolutionary psychologists and these different folks would want to study them. You mentioned that they are, over 98% comparable to us in terms of DNA, perhaps even more so than the common chimp. So how does that rank compared to, I guess, common chimps and orangutans and gorillas and, sort of the basic understanding of biology that we all sort of go into when we look at the evolutionary chart?
Well, we're all apes. Mm-hmm. The human ape, sometimes called the naked ape, because we're not so hairy. Well, except you, Christy. Hey, you got your bonobo coming out. That's cool. We're all apes. Bonobos are apes. We're all great apes, actually. Bonobos, the ones you named, common chimpanzees, orangutans, gorillas, and we're all great. I mean, there are, there's greatness in all the apes, and they're all endangered, kind of including humans these days, except there's a lot of us, so we don't seem endangered. But with climate change, we are. But the other apes, there's not so many, and we do have to save them all, I think, because there's so few. And bonobos, there's very, very few. And the other apes are great. They don't have as much sex. What can I say? I don't think that's so great.
Not as cool, but, still
not as female empowered. The females are very empowered in Bonoboville. They're kind of the opposite in common chimpville, where the males are dominant and might makes right. And you could say, They're Trumpanzees. No, I won't say that. But you could. Someone could.
Somebody theoretically, not you, but
I
someone
will
out
just
there.
say they're very male dominant. They're very might is right. The females get raped a lot. They make war on each other. They kind of do a lot of the things that humans do when they're in a bad way. Although common chimps kind of have a good time. I mean, one thing great about common chimps is how much fun they have. And I don't think humans have quite as much fun with hurting others. So then you got your gorillas, who are great. They're very peaceful, actually, although they do commit infanticide, because when the big gorilla, dies, the alpha male, and usually he's not killed by the other gorillas who are afraid of him,
Mhm.
but then the other male gorillas will come in and kill this alpha male's female harem's babies.
Mhm.
And that makes the female start to ovulate and be interested in sex, which she wasn't before. So it's all very unfortunate, and it's not doesn't happen among bonobos. Bonobos don't know who the father is anyway, and that's a big part of why they are so peaceful. But it's not the only reason. And then there are orangutans who are really wonderful, and in some ways they look the most like humans, I think.
Mhm.
But they and very smart and relatively peaceful, although they have killed, and they do kill, and they rape, and they're very kind of solitary compared to bonobos and common chimps, who are very social like humans.
Mhm.
So it's a little something about each of the apes, and I love them all, but bonobos are my favorite. What can I say? I have a boner for bonobos.
Yeah, as we're looking at all these different categories, I mean, how close are we related? I mean, compared to a human and a gorilla, a human and a bonobo to a gorilla, I mean, what does that distance really look like in terms of just giving us an understanding of the significance of bonobo culture or behavior?
They have charts for that. I'm not the best at describing a chart, except I can say that up until very recently, they've said that common chimps and bonobos are the closest equally to humans.
Hmm.
And then come gorillas, and then come orangutans. And lately, I've just been reading and seeing. I'm not a primatologist, I'm a
Sure, sure.
sexologist who loves bonobos, but I read and I talk to a lot of primatologists, and a lot of them are saying, hey, we think bonobos are a little bit closer.
Hmm.
So, hey, yay, bonobos. Go bonobos.
Well, it's just an interesting idea to find this sort of previously neglected model, for humanity. Not to say that we should be modeling ourselves after another species, but simply that we can recognize this sort of narrative about ourselves. I mean, Stanley Kubrick in 2001 and all of these things, we look at chimpanzees and we think of that as sort of our distant cousin. And
Yeah.
bonobos weren't really even known about, by anybody until relatively recently. But it also seems that they've become very popular in common culture in only the past couple of years. I
Well,
know. I'm sorry.
common chimps were discovered in the 17th century,
Mhm.
and that was a big thing, and it still is a big thing. And they are very close to humans, and that is the idea that we have of why humans are the way we are in many ways. And there's this whole idea of the killer ape,
Mhm.
and that common chimps are killers, and they are not as bad as humans by any means. And all the great apes, except for bonobos, so far, I hope we don't teach them how to kill. I hope that bonobos can teach us how to make peace through pleasure before we teach them how to kill, because they are a learning species just like we are. They're
Mhm.
not all about instinct. I don't know who is, besides maybe just fruit flies, but mostly, I think non-human animals are more thoughtful than we give them credit for. But certainly bonobos are, and they learn from each other, and they learn from humans. They learn how to speak through sign language and through computers. And I've seen bonobos defeat humans at, computer games. And anyway, common chimps are also very smart. And so up until 1930, nobody knew about bonobos. They were discovered in 1930, and they were thought at first to be a kind of junior common chimp because their head is a little smaller. They're actually taller, and they stand up and they walk around on two legs more, but their head is smaller, so they discovered a skull, and they thought, oh, this is just a little common chimp, but it's really a bonobo, and it's a separate species. And they gradually started, they being primatologists, started to see that. Yerkes was someone who was at my alma mater, and he had a wonderful chimp that he named Prince Chim. He didn't know why Prince Chim was such a cool guy and non-violent compared to the common chimp that he had. And they hadn't discovered bonobos yet, but then they did. And wow, Prince Chim was a bonobo. And gradually they started to acknowledge this, but it was still kind of not something that most primatologists wanted to study in the 50s and even the 60s, because bonobos were just so sexual.
Mm-hmm.
And they looked like us, or maybe like the professor that you're trying to do your dissertation for, and you're trying to get tenure. And it's just not, it was awkward. It was embarrassing
Sure.
to study bonobos. They're so sexual. They have sex right in front of you. They invite you to have sex. They are wild. And they don't fit into those boxes of the killer ape. And so you got to start, and they're female empowered and all these things. And so it took a while before the hallowed halls of academia were filled with bonobo loving primatologists.
Mm-hmm.
And now they are. I think they kind of are. I think it's happening. I think that bonobos are being acknowledged. They're being taught in anthropology classes, in psychology classes, and in all the classes, and certainly primatology. And they're being studied as much as common chimps, and they're being acknowledged. And even the culture is starting to say things I've been saying for almost 30 years. But in any case, I'm happy to see it. I'm really happy to see that a lot of people, including the females in the Me Too movement, the human females, are acknowledging the female empowered nature of bonobos. I just hope they also acknowledge the male well-being angle of that. That's very important too.
That is so interesting to me, the fact that there are areas that no one would think of that have been touched by purity culture and by this concept of sex as bad and as taboo.
That even academics and these researchers and zoologists.
It's not something that would come up normally, but this is fascinating to me that we are lacking in knowledge, or have been for so long, just because sex ugly,
Yeah. When I first found out about bonobos, and it was on television, on a PBS special called The Nature of Sex, which I just loved because I was a young sex therapist and I had just gotten married, and I wanted to understand, humans in terms of our animal nature. And it was like a 4-part series, and they didn't have internet, so you had to actually watch every night. And on the last night, they showed bonobos, and they didn't say anything about how female empowered they were. They just showed them having sex. And I was just amazed at how like human they looked. They just, looked like a porn movie with a lot of hair, which maybe like the 70s. So anyway, I just thought, wow, these are sexual creatures whose community is based on a cohesion that is established through sex. And then the announcer says, not only that, they don't make war. They don't kill each other. And I went, oh my God, this is make love, not war. This is the hippie ethic that everybody's been debunking. Debunk. Humans aren't like that. We can't do that. We all turn into Charlie Manson or George W. Bush. And, it's impossible for us to be sex positive and peaceful. It just doesn't happen. But bonobos show not only does it happen, but it happens. It's kind of a cause and effect kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just remarkable how, as our understanding of science expands, as our understanding of the world expands, how all of these boxes that we like to put humans in, as, you know, only existing as male and female, as only existing as heterosexual, as only existing as these warlike primates with more sophisticated and advanced clubs, rather than seeing us as these hypersexual bonobos just with a more sophisticated language. As we expand our definition or our understanding of the world, our definition of ourself is changing. I think that's a really exciting time to be a part of.
Absolutely, Christy. And, you know, as a sex therapist, a fellow sex therapist, although, of course, I'm not licensed or accredited by ASECT, although I did just deliver the Bonobo Way at ASECT.
Oh, wow.
So I do participate in my Outre way. So in any case, yes, I do have a lot of kinky clients. I have a lot of clients who are from very religious backgrounds and live in religious cultures and want to understand their kinky or somewhat non-vanilla desires and want to understand, you know, why and how these occur. And bonobos do help with that. Like I said, we shouldn't use them as blueprints. We shouldn't all, you know, have sex with everybody in the community, as bonobos tend to do. And we shouldn't all, you know, have sleep in trees, you know, although I don't know, some of that could be cool. And some people might like having sex with everyone in their community. And bonobos show that there's nothing wrong with that. And they show that, you know, bisexuality, certainly a certain level of androgyny. The females are very male in many ways. The males are very laid back and in touch with their feminine side. They do a lot of outercourse. It's not all about penis and vagina.
Yeah.
They do a lot of licking and touching and squeezing and tickling and a little bit of spanking even. And they just, you know, they have a kind of a kinky way of approaching sex. And I think the really bottom line of kink is that it's non-reproductive sex.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people say non-reproductive sex is not natural. It's natural to put the penis in the vagina and make a baby. Well, okay, that's natural. But bonobos show us that a lot of other kinds of recreational sex is also quite natural. And not only is it natural, but it's good. It's good.
Yeah, it serves a
good
purpose.
In that religious way. Good for the community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's something that I feel I hear over and over and over again, particularly when we're talking about homosexuality or these different forms of sexual expression. I mean, the Catholic...
Bonobos are gay, and that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. This idea that sex serves a broader purpose than procreation, that sex exists as a form of communication, as a form of soothing, as a form of, you know, both self-soothing and of maintaining group cohesion. And yeah, I mean, we see it every week in couples therapy and things like that, the importance of sex to bond two people together, but it certainly doesn't have to be limited to that either.
Right. And, you know, if you're tuned in live, happy Self-Love September. And then, of course, May is Masturbation Month. And as St. George of Carlin said, if God had intended us not to masturbate, he or she would have made our arms shorter. And that is so obvious when you look at bonobos, and they do love to masturbate. And I must admit, they masturbate more in the zoo and in captivity. And actually, maybe humans would too if they were allowed to. And because, you know, it's a little bit frustrating in there. And masturbation is a soothing action. It's trying to help yourself with your problems and with your needs and your need to release. And I guess in the zoo, it's like a prison in a way, even though they have a pretty nice pad in some of the zoos. But, you know, they need to do a lot of self-soothing. So they probably masturbate more in the zoo. But all these other kinds of so-called kinky activities bonobos engage in as well, like you know, foot. Some of them really get into the foot fetish. They're like chewing on these toes, and yeah, they're all pretty bisexual, but they do develop favorites, and sometimes the favorite is of the same sex, and the favorite doesn't usually last their whole life, although he or she could. And so, you know, sometimes they could be more gay and sometimes more straight and sometimes completely bisexual. Certainly the homosexuality among bonobos, the gay sex, whatever you want to call it, is very, very important to keeping the peace. I'll just put that out there. So is I almost said regular. So is the penis and vagina and the boy-girl sex. That's also important. It's all important, but it's very interesting how important the gay sex is to keeping the peace in Bonoboville.
Well, and it's just fascinating to me to think of like a bonobo Kinsey scale and this idea that there is genetic variability and variability of orientation, and that this, you know, very close cousin to humanity models these behaviors that we think of as being very human and oftentimes for many of us as corrupt and as evidence that our divine nature is being destroyed by the world, when in reality we see it beautifully in the natural world in a way that's functional.
Yeah, and that's what I tell my clients, you know, it's natural. I mean, not every natural behavior is a good one.
Sure.
Rape is natural, not a good behavior. Non-consensual sex in general is pretty natural. I mean, bonobos do that, but not hardly at all. And if they do, and, you know, of course, if it would be a male with a female, although it could be a female with a male, usually the other bonobos will come in and jump on the culprit and stop it. And certainly that's a big, big part of female solidarity, because the males are bigger and stronger and they could defeat the females. A lot of guys say when I do my Bonobo Way lectures, why do the guys put up with this? You know, I mean, they're just like the common chimps. They could beat the females down easily, physically, but they like their life. The females treat them good, and if they do beat on a female, her sisters will beat up on him. And whereas one female is not going to succeed against one male, two probably will. And three, well, it's girls' night out. And so the boys know to behave, or else they're in trouble, as well as they kind of like the life. They do like the life. And the females are very good to them. They provide them with sex, as well as they encourage them to have sex with each other, which they also like.
Yeah, you have made it clear that, you know, we want to sort of look and learn from without necessarily taking a direct blueprint. And of course, we want to be aware of sort of the naturalistic fallacy. Like you said, just because something is natural doesn't make it noble, helpful, good, right, just. I mean, whatever term we want to apply there. But what are some of the aspirational aspects of bonobo culture that you wish humans would see more of in themselves? I mean, I definitely hear what you're talking about with female solidarity, with female empowerment, as well as male welfare. But what might that look like for humanity?
Well, first of all, just to address your particular audience.
Sure.
Bonobos are not religious, obviously, but they are, in certain definitions of the word, spiritual creatures. I was once on a show where a priest said, no other creature on earth is spiritual. No other creature could go to heaven. And I don't really believe in heaven, but I'm always like, hey, if it exists, who knows? I don't know. But I would put my money where my mouth is. If it exists, bonobos are going there. And if it exists, lots of animals are going there, not just humans. Well, humans aren't that special of an animal. And bonobos, they have this love and this compassion. And yeah, we can explain it through their actions, through their female solidarity, their female empowerment, through the male well-being, through the peace, through pleasure, through the sex. But it gives them this empathy and this holiness, I think, that that can help a lot of people who are suffering from religious sexual abuse and trying to move beyond that and find not a model, not a role model, but kind of an inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
And something special. Bonobos aren't angels. They're animals just like us, and they are violent. They can be, but they just don't kill each other. So maybe they're more in touch with their angel side than we are. I don't know. They have problems, but they seem to be able to work their problems out. Of course, human encroachment could stop all that. Now, by the way, speaking of religion, I just want to show you my pillow. See, I can't ever understand how religious people want to have a pillow where they lean up against the sacred Last Supper. But, hey, I think it's a beautiful painting. And I love Jesus. A lot of people say they ask, what would Jesus do when they don't know what to do? Sure. And, I do too sometimes. I look to religious figures. I also look to atheists like Spinoza. What would Spinoza do? I also look to the bonobos. I say, what would a bonobo do if I'm not sure how to handle a situation? So, they are an inspiration in that way, in that spiritual way. And of course, an inspiration in that sexual way, where, you might feel strange that you want to have sex with more than just your significant other. And bonobos show you how natural that is. They have favorites, like I said, but they tend to have sex with different bonobos. They also like strangers a lot. They like their friends a lot, but nothing excites a bonobo as much as some enchanted evening with a stranger, and I guess this shows us that we too can reach out to the stranger, and we have a desire to do that, and that desire is part of our tendency, our initiative to make peace through pleasure. Mm-hmm. You could say, one of my inspirations is Dr. Franz de Waal, who is a primatologist, and he has said that we have a chimpanzee side, we humans, and we have a bonobo side. And so, are we going to be jealous and warlike like our common chimp side, or are we going to be sexual and compassionate and empathetic like our bonobo side? Bonobos are a little Jesus-like, except for the celibacy.
Yeah, I certainly like that model a lot better than the old cartoon of the angel and the demon. I would much rather have a common chimp and a bonobo. I definitely can imagine who I'd listen to more, but...
Yeah, angels are fake, bonobos are real. They really exist. They are as amazing as angels. They're as amazing as the aliens that we look to, hoping, are we going to find somebody that's like us? Well, there is somebody that's like us, and they're right here on Earth, and we hardly know them. We've only discovered them in 1930, and they were censored for so many years, and they're still censored. Mm-hmm. I was kicked off of AOL in the early days of the internet for a few things, for recommending masturbation. I didn't have any nudity, any person nudity, but I did show bonobos. And I was kicked off because of bonobos, showing bonobo sex, kicked off of AOL. I still have their letter. And they wrote letters in those days. And, it was eye-opening. I like couldn't believe it. I like, well, this is primatology. But yeah, they are close to us. They're amazing. And I'm very inspired by them. And I hope you are too. Release your inner bonobo.
It's interesting because I feel like maybe this is just me reading into it, but part of the reason maybe the focus is on common chimps is like we can look at them and be like, oh, well, I'm not that bad, therefore I must be a good human.
I'm more evolved.
Right, like look how evolved I am. I'm not murdering my kids and raping the females in the group, so I must be good. And then looking at maybe the bonobo, it's like, oh, maybe I'm not the most evolved one of the bunch in this scenario.
Yeah, that kind of screws up that whole humans are the stewards of the earth kind of thing, doesn't it?
Right.
It screws it up. Bonobos definitely screw up a lot of what most major monotheistic religions, and even some of the pantheistic religions, although the pantheistic religions are at least a little bit better, but definitely the monotheistic religions, bonobos screw it all up. They put the lie to all those lies. And yeah, I mean, the bonobos, their Latin name is Pan Paniscus. And in a way, they are ruled by the god Pan, the lord of nature. And one thing I like about Greek and Roman mythology is that it is mythology. It's stories. And I think on some level, they kind of felt that. They didn't have this purity test about, do you really believe in the gods and goddesses? Well, maybe sometimes they did it for political reasons, like we do, I guess. But yeah, I mean, they had all these different gods and goddesses, and for different types of interests, and Pan was certainly about the earthy desires, and bonobos are kind of in that realm. They are Pan Paniscus. That is their Latin name. And I like it. I like it better than them being called pygmy chimpanzees, which is another name for them, which just makes them sound like little chimps.
Yeah, well, as we, look to them for all of this inspiration and maybe kind of redefine our views on humans and what we're meant to be, and, this notion that we were created by God to be superior to the animals, and this one just happens to look a lot like us, and, getting away from all of those notions and realizing, I guess, our potential. I'd love to hear you tell the audience just a little bit about the bonobo liberation therapy that you work on with your institute and with your clients.
Yeah, well, we provide all types of sex therapy for every desire or lack of desire, and underlying it, and sometimes really focusing on it, is bonobo liberation therapy. And it's based on a lot of what we've been talking about, and how the bonobos can be an inspiration to less than the straight and narrow desires that so many of us think we ought to have. And even if we're not religious, we sometimes think there's something wrong with us for having desires perhaps for different partners, although there is a polyamory movement now. But still, a lot of people do feel weird, I guess, for even having gay desires, even though that's pretty culturally acceptable. If you're down there in the South or the Midwest or some other religious environment, perhaps. I have clients in Saudi Arabia that call me, and in the depths of Alabama. I don't know who's more restrictive about sex and religion, but they all have the same desires and fantasies as everybody else does. And yet people in those environments are very stressed, very worried, very torn. And also people, even in liberated LA and San Francisco, can be torn by what they think they're supposed to be. So bonobos provide an inspiration for you. It also provides an understanding that sex is important, that sex is not some side thing that you shouldn't be doing so much of, that you shouldn't be thinking so much about. Bonobos show us that it's important to the individual, to the relationship, and to all of society. That if you're ignoring that, that you get like the incel movement. There are no incels in Bonoboville. There just aren't. The community would recognize that as a problem.
That isolating behavior
and help somehow. And it is a complicated problem, but it's gotten that way partly because of our more common chimp-like society and more, female denigrating and sex denigrating society is what has spawned the incels. And I have some incel clients, and incels need love, incels need sex, and they don't get it. And bonobos show us that they should get it. And it's something that's an important part it should be an important part of feminism, but too many feminists just want to say, oh, these guys, they don't know how to treat women, just throw them in the trash.
Yeah, no, I certainly hear a lot of that. And I wonder how different, I mean, even just YouTube culture, to, speak directly to our audience tonight, how different YouTube culture would look if people understood what you said at the top of the show about how female empowerment and male welfare are not antagonistic to one another. It certainly isn't as if as one goes up, the other goes down, but instead that just general well-being for everybody can be lifted up. And then we don't have angry young men screaming at each other on the internet and or bringing assault rifles into movie theaters.
At least not so much.
Yeah.
We're getting out of control. Like I said, bonobos aren't angels. They're animals like us, and they might be screaming, they get jealous, they get upset, they hit each other. They just kind of control it. They stop short of killing each other. They don't have much rape. They don't have much violence, and they work it out. They deal with the same emotions that we have, and they work it out. These emotions are real. We are complicated creatures, just like bonobos. They're complicated. Mm-hmm. We're social creatures. We have, these kinks. They have kinks too. They love to combine food and sex. By the way, that gives me an opportunity to promote
food and sex,
splosh and art. Bonobos love to splosh. There's stuff on bonobos in here, but it's mostly about humans. But it's a particular fetish. I have magazines on all different fetishes, but this is one that basically combines food and sex in the same act. I'm not saying all humans should do that by any means. Although I do think all humans should recognize that food and sex are two of the basic needs of life, and they're also two basic representations of love, and that they don't necessarily equal love, but that we use them a lot to mean love and emotion, and that we should deal with that. Anyway, some people deal with it through a kink called splosh, and so we have a magazine devoted to splosh and art featuring Danielle Watts and Chef P Live, and a lot of vegan splosh here. By the way, we also have spank and art, which is another fetish, and it also features bonobos because they slap each other, spank each other, tickle each other. They have aggressive erotic maneuvers that they do, and that can sometimes make people feel like, oh, they're not so peaceful. Well, excuse me, they are. You could also say that about some BDSM people. Oh, they're hitting each other. Well, we have violence in us, and it's good to get that out in a consensual, careful, responsible way. Bonobos seem to be able to do that, and we can too. So, we have all these kinks. We need to it's not all lovey-dovey. But on the other side of it, bonobos aren't always having hard, porn star sex.
Aggressive.
They have a lot of slow sex. A lot. In fact, they take all day to have sex. A lot of foreplay. So foreplay is cool. Sometimes, in fact, this is something odd that I'm still trying to wrap my head around. Bonobos, actually the penis and vagina part or an anus, is very quick. It's just a few seconds. They don't spend a lot of time on that. They spend a lot of time on what we might call foreplay, on the licking and the sucking and the squeezing and rubbing. They do a lot of that. And they kind of demonstrate to us how important foreplay is.
Yeah, I think that's, again, just a reminder about the non-procreative nature of sex, that,
Yes.
actual intercourse is relatively small, and even, getting away from words like foreplay and just acknowledging that is sex, and that all sex, whether it's between two men, two women, etc., is still valid in that it serves that same function of, drawing closeness and creating, intimacy, fun, stress relief. I mean, these different aspects.
Yeah. We actually have a question in the chat. Someone asked, what are bonobos' average community size?
But I would say anywhere from 10 to 50.
Oh, wow. That's big.
Yeah, they have bigger communities than among common chimps. Common chimps maybe part of common chimps' problems. Part of bonobo, bonobos are more urban. I mean, they got bigger communities. Still very small communities compared to human cities, but they have a lot of people. They're not into the nuclear family, that's for sure.
Okay, interesting.
And by the way, I just want to say one term I use a lot, I didn't invent it, but instead of foreplay is outercourse.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's an important idea.
That can be just as important as the so-called main course. It's not an appetizer. It's the thing, outercourse. And it can be much safer sex than intercourse. And yeah, bonobos, the females do a lot of what the primatologists call genital or GG rubbing, where they rub each other's vulvas and clitorises together, and they have orgasms. They have big orgasms from doing that, and they scream. They scream because, why do females scream? It's interesting. They scream more when there are others around than when they're all alone. Why do you think that is?
Oh, I actually think I looked this up once. Doesn't it have something to do with attracting other mates and letting them know, like, I'm here?
They want other mates, exactly. They're not
mate selection.
At least not mentally. They want others to know they're hot, they're available, that they could do it with you too. So they moan and they scream. And interestingly, among bonobos, they do it not just to attract males, but also to attract other females.
Yeah, see, that aspect of it I definitely wasn't aware of. But you reference in your book a number of times, Dr. Christopher Ryan's work, Sex at Dawn, which
Shout out to Dr. Christopher Ryan, author of Sex at Dawn.
Yeah, absolutely. I found his book to be absolutely fascinating. I think it may be in part, there's certainly others, but in part why bonobos are becoming more understood and recognized just in pop culture. But anyway, he does really illustrate that idea of internal mate selection and this notion that monogamy, at least sexual monogamy, is not all that common among certain types of primates, bonobos in particular. And in ancient humans, likely, we were not monogamous for most of our existence as a species, and that those, I believe the scientific or scholastic term for it is female vocalizations. Those great bed-shattering moans are a way of inviting other people into the party, which I think is just completely different from the worldview of sexuality that we're taught in school, on TV, I mean, just in every other aspect of life.
And let us be taught that now. And let us say amen and a women. So, yes, and that's in Krista's book, I believe, about the female vocalization. But yeah, Krista's book and Sex at Dawn, and he's coming out with a new one, Civilized to Death. And I do think that a lot of people are opening their eyes to our polyamorous past, or let's just say our non-monogamous past.
Sure.
And to seeing, you know, hey, maybe if the diet was good, maybe the sex life was also good. Maybe certain things about that were more egalitarian. You know, he talks about fierce egalitarians, and that they were very adamant about nobody getting too much credit for anything. And that, you know, if you got, you know, if you brought home a big kill from the hunt, and bonobos are hunters, by the way, they're not vegetarians. They eat mostly vegetables and fruits, mostly fruits, actually. But they do eat a little meat every once in a while. So some people say that means they're not peaceful, but they don't kill each other. That's the main thing. They don't kill each other, okay? So don't get on them for having a hamburger every once in a while. All right. So anyway, but I think a lot of people are are looking at our distant prehistoric past and seeing inspiration in that, partly because of, you know, just the qualities of life, and partly because, you know, our massive civilization might not be what we would call so civilized, and maybe the most humane creatures aren't even human. They're bonobos, because bonobos are kind of close to what these prehistoric humans may have been like. I mean, I personally, and again, I'm, you know, a student of Sex at Dawn and a lot of things like that. And I don't think that we started killing each other, certainly didn't start making war on each other until we got civilized, until we started having something worth killing over. Bonobos don't have anything worth killing over. You know, common chimps are much more bloodthirsty, and they have territory. Bonobos have territory, but maybe they don't take it so seriously. But humans, yeah, we get territory. We own that land. We own the animals on that land. We own the crops on that land. We own the people on that land. And then when somebody wants to steal it, we got to defend it. And then we start killing people. And we start war, and all that stuff gets going. And my feeling is that, you know, probably was a woman who discovered where babies come from, you know, but once men got the news, good news, the bad news, that, yeah, there's one dad, and it's you or it's not. And then they start going, whoa, wait a second. I got kids, and these are my kids. These kids belong to me. And so where did we get these kids from? This woman? Well, that woman belongs to me. I can't have her having sex with other guys. Oh my God. Because if she has sex with other guys, those kids don't belong to me. I'm growing somebody else's kids with my money, my crops, my animals. And this is bad. Can't do this. Got to imprison the woman. Got to imprison the kids too, you know, and put them to work on the farm, put the woman to work, lock her up, and defend her with spears, and then guns, and then bombs.
Nuclear bombs, yeah. Yeah, and I think it's important to remember that these ideas of mate guarding for inheritance, of developing land, of agriculture, and the territorialism that comes from this is the house that I built, that all of that is basically a blink in the eye, evolutionarily speaking, that's not necessarily a part of our genetic heritage. That's just something that we only very recently, I mean, the advent of agriculture is a blip in our existence in basically this state genetically. So we can, we don't have to say that there's a right or a wrong to our genetic heritage, but this idea that we have to be this way because that's the way we were built or designed or developed just isn't accurate.
No, it's we've been in these bodies with these minds for, I don't know, a couple 100,000 years, at least 100,000. And we've only been doing this, as you say, farming, mate guarding thing for at the most 12,000 years, really more like with civilization, 5,000 years. And then, of course, religion is a part of that. It starts with the pagan religions, but again, I think bonobos are spiritual. I think humans, found spirits in the trees and spirits in everyone and hoped that something happened beyond death because death is frightening to us all.
Sure.
And so we have a spirituality that hopes something in the stars is there, something else, but this whole idea that there are gods that rule over us and that we have the right to rule over the animals and even the plants, that's something that religion has to enforce, and that is part of owning private property, is part of, the whole, what eventually led to the capitalist system and leads to, the male dominant system and leads to ultimate destruction. So either we're going to learn from the bonobos and ourselves and other nature and make some very vital changes, or we're not. And if we don't, there might be a few humans left, and maybe we'll practice the bonobo way. I don't know. I'm so torn. I mean, I certainly don't want us to destroy human civilization. I'm on that, bandwagon of trying to educate my fellow humans and save, not the earth. The earth will survive, but more like, I guess, save a lot of life on Earth, including us, and certainly save the bonobos. I don't know if it's time yet to talk about saving bonobos.
Yeah,
but,
I mean, that really was my next question.
Okay, we're definitely synced up then. So we should save the bonobos. I know there's a lot of species that need saving. We're killing so many every day, and they all are worth saving. But, bonobos are so close to us and they have so much to teach us. And so, I have a foundation, Block Bonobo Foundation, but we contribute to 3 very special organizations, and I encourage you to contribute to them, and I'll describe them just a little bit, each of them. First is Lola Ya Bonobo, which rescues bonobos. The bushmeat trade is rockin', and it's horrific. Bonobos basically are doing fine in the jungle. Well, all the species are suffering from the degradation of all the of the main rainforests in the Amazon as well as the Congo. They live in the second biggest rainforest in the world, which is the Congo rainforest in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And though bushmeat hunting is illegal, they do it, and bushmeat is not on the menu, but you can ask for it and get it, and it's terrible, and we have to do what we can to stop it. But meanwhile, when they kill a mother, the babies are left, and they don't generally kill the babies because they're too small. They don't have that much meat. It's disgusting, but anyway, so the babies are saved. Sometimes they sell them to a zoo, and they shouldn't, because the zoos don't know what to do with them. Any zoo that would buy a baby from black market people like that is not a good zoo. And so, sometimes my friends, run by Claudine Andre, who's I call her the Joan of Arc of bonobos, and she's fabulous, and she founded Lola Ya Bonobo. And my other friend, Vanessa Woods, is also there and runs Friends of Bonobos, and Dr. Brian Hare is associated with the Friends of Bonobos, and they have a sanctuary outside of Kinshasa called Lola, which is bonobo, means bonobo paradise, Lola Ya Bonobo. And they bring these almost dead little babies back to life. and then ultimately send them back into the jungle, or the halfway house, really, the jungle near Lola. And a lot of them do very well. And then there's another organization called Bonobo Conservation Initiative, which is run by my other friend, who I've known since the 1990s, Sally Cox. And Bonobo Conservation Initiative is working right in the jungle, right in the Congo rainforest, with the villagers to stop the bushmeat hunting. They have their people who are, defending the bonobos, literally. And the difference is, in their rainforest, there's a lot of villagers that live there. There's a lot of people living among the wildlife, but they live in a very, very almost prehistoric way. And not quite. Everybody nowadays is influenced by civilization, but they're kind of close, and they understand. The Mogandu people, called the bonobos, are brothers and sisters. They understand the bonobos are special and should not be killed, and should not be eaten. That's like cannibalism. But there are people that come in from other cultures, like Rwanda and other places, and they kill the bonobos. And so Sally and the Bonobo Conservation Initiative, please give to them, because they've established the Bonobo Peace Forest. And they help to stop the killing, and they deliver babies to lowly bonobos. So it's like a network. And then part of the network is promotion. I do my promoting, but I'm a little kinky. I got my adult network that I talk to about sex and bonobos. And a lot of the primatologists and even the promoters are a little reluctant to talk about the sex so much. They talk about the love, they talk about the peace, they talk about the female empowerment, but they don't talk so much about the sex. And I understand, because, bonobos are kinky, but I do. And so anyway, but there's all kinds of promotion that's important, and promotion that doesn't focus on sex, promotion that kind of focuses more holistically on bonobos. And also bonobos are great parents, great mothers, and in a way parents, because the dads, they don't know who the dad is. So they're all like great uncles, and they don't kill them. So, common chimps and gorillas and orangutans sometimes kill babies. So bonobos don't do that. So that makes them great fathers, I think. And even though they don't know who the father is. So, but the mothers are really great. Really great. And so the Bonobo Project, run by a mother, and so it is a wonderful promotional society, the Bonobo Project. And so I think that's all three.
Well, and it breaks my heart to think about the ways that not only are populations shrinking, and not only is there a very legitimate risk of extinction and these different things, but just the way that you said everybody, all species are being affected by civilization, and the way that we could be affecting bonobo culture, I guess. I find it really fascinating as more research is being done. We recognize that a lot of what we think about humans comes from like Jane Goodall's studies at Gombe, and we're starting to recognize that those studies, as beautiful and important as they were, may have been flawed in a lot of ways, and that we may have been altering their behavior with the way that the researchers were interacting with them. And so now
I love Jane Goodall. I love Dr. Jane Goodall. And
absolutely,
actually,
one of my heroes personally.
She sent me a note, her assistant did, which, and it says she loves the Bonobo Way. And I had sent her a free book. And so, I'm a big fan, and I don't believe her research was flawed. It's just she was studying common chimps.
Yeah, I certainly don't mean to suggest that
the
it was
interpretation that we are killer apes. I'm sorry, but it is a little bit of a nitpick here, but I do believe it's important that we have research on all these apes, and that they are what they are. And then the bonobos should be the subject of a lot of research now, as they are. And they should be. And more and more research is being done, so that we see we are not necessarily killer apes. Yeah, I guess we are because of what we do. But so many of us aren't.
But
So many of
we
us are
don't have
against
to
it.
be.
You know,
Yeah.
all the common chimps are for the killing. They're all for it. They're all on board with that.
Mhm.
There's nobody going, no, no, unless it's maybe their friend. Of course, they defend their friends, but they're not against killing in general. There are a lot of humans that are against killing in general. And I don't believe that's just because of our so-called human intelligence. I believe it's because it's our bonobo side. It's the side of us that really doesn't want to kill, that knows that killing hurts. And there are a lot of people who do kill and come back with something we call PTSD because killing hurts, not just the people who are killed, although it hurts them a lot more, but it does kill, it hurts the people who do the killing. And that's because, I don't know if it's so natural to humans to
Yeah.
kill,
Well,
like that.
I just find it interesting, but also kind of terrifying to think that there are, perhaps a generation of bonobos that are growing up after having been orphaned by hunters and then raised in this sort of awkward captivity, re-released into the wild. And then I think about, the shrinking of territory, the added stress of a lack of resources, all of these different complications that we introduce to their lives. Recognizing what we know about humans, about lab rats, about really every animal that we study, that these types of complications, these types of obstacles can dramatically affect behavior. And so just the idea that lost to the world could be the science of studying a, truly primitive, truly untouched bonobo and getting an understanding of, if not of what humans were like pre-civilization, pre-agriculture, but at least having that link that is rapidly shrinking. That's a terrifying idea to me.
It's very terrifying, and I appreciate all of the research being done, but every time I open my Google alerts to bonobo, I worry that some researcher put a spear in a bonobo's hands and that she threw it. That I'm going to find out that she threw it, because, hey, why not? Or that he put a gun in a bonobo's hands and that she pulled the trigger because she's curious. And then she goes, oh, what's that? I mean, I don't know. I hope they never do that. And like I said, I hope we learn from them before they learn our nasty ways. And I have mixed feelings because I love, that certain bonobos are brought up by humans and can communicate through computers. I think it's kind of messed up. I think zoos are kind of messed up. But on the other hand, if it wasn't for the San Diego Zoo, I wouldn't have made some bonobo friends that I've made. And I have mixed feelings about human civilization in general. I guess. I don't think I'd be here. I'd be like you. I'm wearing contact lenses, but I'd be bumping into things without human civilization. I would have killed myself a long time ago bumping into a tree. So, I'm grateful for opticians, and I'm grateful for so many doctors and wonderful aspects of human civilization. But can we possibly take some of the bad aspects out? I don't know. I just know that bonobos are cool and we should be inspired by them. We should be inspired sexually. I'm a sex therapist. I think that would help in the immediate short run with a lot of our sexual problems. And by sexual problems, I do mean a lot of the ones that fuel violence. And I just think that bonobos should be saved so that we can continue. And yes, studying them is very scary because we could corrupt them. But I don't know. I guess no, not so far. Dr. Brian Hare talks about meeting a beautiful older female bonobo who was released, I'm going to cry, from a medical facility where she spent her whole life. And he thought she would be angry with her. He thought she would be angry with him. And she wasn't. She embraced him.
really
So they
is
do
a
understand
beautiful and compelling
compassion.
thing.
And they can even feel it when they've been mistreated. It shows that, all that stuff, and I do believe it as a sex therapist, that if you've been abused, you're more likely to abuse, but you don't have to.
Yeah, I think it's a very beautiful thing to see our own humanity sort of reflected in these different ways. And I do hope that we continue to learn and to just build up a better understanding of our whole world and ourselves as part of that.